It's 3 a.m., you are staring at the ceiling, and you've tried everything: deep breathing, counting sheep, even telling your brain to fully shut off, and nothing you seem to try works. Does that at all sound familiar? Trust me, I have been there. I have Googled night after night how to make myself sleep, and little did I know that this was actually making my insomnia worse. It took me a bit of time, but I eventually learned something that completely changed my approach to sleepless nights, and today I would love to share this with you. So here's what I used to do when I couldn't sleep, and let me tell you, none of it helped. To start, I used to be obsessed with getting my 8 hours of sleep. In fact, when I first started struggling with not being able to fall asleep, I was obsessed with checking the clock. I would genuinely check the clock every 10 to 15 minutes as a way of monitoring whether or not I had or had not fallen asleep. I would spend hours every single night just lying awake in bed, and every couple of minutes I would almost have like that confirmation of, oh yeah, you are still awake. This is definitely alarming and something that is not right here. And once I realized that, I guess, lying awake in bed was definitely not helpful, I then attempted to make myself sleep. And my making myself sleep, specifically also as a yoga teacher, meant incorporating all of these fancy meditations and breathwork routines prior to bed and also in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. I became hyper focused and very much fixated on how to optimize your sleep. I would listen to all of Andrew Huberman's podcasts. I tried progressive muscle relaxation. I tried meditation. I tried sleep, or yoga nidra for sleep. You name it, I tried it all. And on the nights in which I was just like so frustrated with the fact that I wasn't sleeping at all, I tried to reason with my brain. It was like this continuous dialogue happening up here of like, okay, how to make myself sleep, or how to avoid certain thoughts that are going to keep me awake, or how do I also avoid things like blue light or anything else that was going to potentially hinder my sleep. So it was really finding that balance of, okay, how can I incorporate routines and sleep efforts that are going to help me relax, and simultaneously, what should I avoid, such as caffeine, blue light, alcohol, even meeting up late with friends in order to preserve the little sleep that I am getting. And I'm not gonna lie, sometimes my emotions and my thoughts would get the better of me. I'd have panic attacks, I would cry, I would wake up my partner. I was hysterical about the fact that I had lost the ability to sleep. In fact, all of these things compounded were just continuously reconfirming that I was in some way broken, that I no longer knew how to sleep, and that this was now my fate and my life moving forward. But at some point, probably a few months into this struggle, I personally decided, and this is where I truly believe that insomnia recovery is a choice. It is a choice once you are ready to surrender to that struggle and to that fight. And once I made the choice, I educated myself on insomnia, and I started realizing that all of these things that I was implementing were actually pushing me further away from sleep. Why? Because I was conditioning my brain that there was actually something to fear, that fear being the fact that I wasn't sleeping. And all of these small little habits and tricks or tips or things that you think that you need to incorporate are simply reinforcing that fear. And what truly changed was realizing that I was fighting wakefulness instead of working with it, and that's when everything changed. And to learn how to work with it, I had to truly understand that wakefulness was not something I had to fear. In fact, it was something I needed to learn how to befriend. Befriend as a way of teaching my brain that this perceived threat that I have created around the fact that I wasn't sleeping was purely just that, a perceived threat, not something I actively needed to avoid or be afraid of. This whole idea behind befriending wakefulness truly took quite a while for me to fully grasp. So if you are personally struggling, just know that this isn't an overnight fix. It all starts with simply knowing that wakefulness is not something you need to fear. And slowly over time, you will find the tools and the resources that are best suited for you and what that befriending wakefulness looks like for your own journey. So, number one and first thing I tried to implement when I finally understood this concept was to stop monitoring the clock. I know it seems counterintuitive and it seems a little bit scary at times to think that you no longer have the clock to continuously check the time. But truly, this removes a lot of pressure around sleep and whether or not you are or are not sleeping. So that first step really was giving myself a 8 to 9 hour time window where I would not check my phone, even if it was in the middle of the night. And look, I wasn't perfect. Sometimes I would check the clock, and that is also okay. But I tried to really move away from this insane amounts of pressure and fixation on whether or not I was or was not sleeping. Number two, if feelings and thoughts around sleep would arise at night, I tried my best not to push them away. I tried my best no longer to have that dialogue with my mind. I simply allowed those thoughts to be. At first, again, this was definitely not easy. Anxiety and emotions around sleep, or something specifically that you think you need to fear, can be very, very overwhelming. And your natural instinct is going to be to try and disprove that theory that your mind is creating. You need to remember that thoughts are something that we unfortunately cannot control, but what we can control is how we react to them. And specifically implementing different kind of meditation techniques that I practice with yoga, I used to almost think of my thoughts as clouds in the sky. I would simply observe them, watch them pass through, and try my best not to get too fixated and too attached to the fact that they were happening. Number three, befriending wakefulness for me personally also meant having something to actively do on the nights where I couldn't sleep. For me, that's always been reading. I go to bed reading every single night. That's usually how I have fallen asleep for the past 16 years of my life. And it felt like a very, I guess, handy way for me to do something that I enjoyed in the middle of the night. This doesn't have to be your option. Like, I know that reading is not everybody's thing. You can also listen to a podcast, you can watch a movie, you can do some coloring if you prefer, like whatever you would personally like. It also doesn't need to be the most calming activity. It can truly just be something you enjoy because you're using this time as a way to teach yourself and to teach your brain that wakefulness is not a threat. So if you start also limiting what those activities are, you are again simply confirming that the threat is real. And then number four, there were definitely times where even reading my book was not enough. There was definitely times where the thoughts and the emotions would be a little bit too overwhelming. There were even times where I felt so awake that I just didn't even want to be in bed. And I would actually pick myself out from bed. And I know this is also not always available to everyone, but I would personally try and remove myself from the bedroom. I'd go to a different room, potentially like, I guess, an office or a couch, and I would try and write down all of my feelings and thoughts. This is called a thought download, where you are quite frankly, downloading all of your thoughts onto a piece of paper. You are trying your best not to give them specific meaning. You are not labeling them as good or bad. You are simply removing everything that is happening up here and just placing it on a piece of paper. And what that personally did for me was help me realize that a lot of the thoughts that were going on in my brain were simply a story that I was telling myself. And quite frankly, a story that was not true. Things around the nature of not being able to perform the next day, or that I was in some way harming myself, but with the fact that I wasn't sleeping. And I started just realizing that I had more evidence or positive evidence around the fact that sleep was something completely natural that my body knew how to give me. In fact, I had more evidence of the good than I did of the bad. It's just like the bad thoughts and the bad stories were definitely a little bit louder than the good ones. And I would sometimes get up out of bed 3 4 times to do these thought downloads, like especially at the beginning, and especially once or when I would go through speed bumps or these small little setbacks. I'd have little moments where I had to remind myself of this education, and really come back to a place of, okay, what does befriending wakefulness look like for me? And that truly entailed a lot of patience, a lot of perseverance. Sometimes The self criticism would also get the best of me. I am only human. You are human too. There is no such thing as perfect recovery. In fact, when you move away from this pressure of having to show up in a certain way, you are also removing the pressure and the stress that you are placing on yourself regarding sleep. And once I truly started internalizing the idea and the fact that sleep was a completely natural process that I didn't have to force, this actually relieved a huge amount of pressure for me because I no longer was responsible for making sleep happen, knowing that sleep was going to eventually happen all by itself. I didn't know how long recovery was going to take, and that was definitely quite scary. It I think at times took longer than I wanted it to, and on those nights where I just couldn't sleep, I just tried to remind myself that I was safe and that I could use that time to do something that I actively enjoyed. So if you have been struggling and you are currently not sure about what to do in the middle of the night, the first thing is just educate yourself on insomnia. Start identifying what your potential sleep efforts are, and maybe even ask yourself, like, are you actively doing this as a means to make yourself sleep, or are you doing this because it is truly something that you enjoy? So that would be number one step. And then two, if you want a little bit more education and support, I have a 5 days to better sleep email series linked below. It is packed with all of the knowledge and all of the tools and resources that I wish that I had first found when I was first struggling. It is completely free. You can go ahead and grab that below.